Welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking something massive, the sheer, unavoidable scale of United States global dominance, and the incredibly complex forces that are threatening it today. We're going to look at the structural foundations that built this superpower and exactly where the stress fractures are starting to show. It's literally the question defining modern geopolitics right now. Is the era of undisputed American dominance actually coming to an end? Are the very foundations of this global superpower cracking under modern pressures? Well, to figure that out, we have to look way past today's headlines and dissect the actual framework of this power. Here's our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The arsenal of democracy. 2. Dollar dominance. 3. The power of attraction. 4. Internal and external pressures. And 5. The future of global power. Let's dive right into Section 1, the arsenal of democracy, from depression to global juggernauts. To really grasp the sheer scale of America's rise, you kind of have to look at its rock bottom first. For a whole decade, right between 1929 and 1939, U.S. unemployment averaged 13.3%. It was this grim era of unused labor. But as World War II escalated, that massive pool of idle capacity was about to be unleashed in a huge way. What followed was an absolute total conversion of American industry between 1940 and 1942. It's what Franklin Roosevelt famously dubbed the arsenal of democracy. Now, this wasn't automatic, right? It required intense, unprecedented coordination. Take Walter Reuther, for example. He was a labor union leader who aggressively pushed some very reluctant automakers to convert their car plants into aircraft factories. And over at the U.S. Maritime Commission, they oversaw a massive surge in shipbuilding, turning out 106 ships between 1938 and 1940. They literally revived a dead industry just to transport global war material. When you look at the data, the sheer scale of this economic leap is just wild. A completely stagnant pre-war economy essentially morphed into a global juggernaut overnight, totally driven by exponential jumps in federal and military spending. And the U.S. didn't just arm itself. Through $32.5 billion in Lend-Lease exports, it armed the entire world, which ultimately left it as the only intact major economy on Earth by 1945. Moving on to Section 2, the dollar dominance, the financial foundation. Okay, so a critically load-bearing pillar of this whole architecture is the petrodollar system. Because global commodities, like oil, are priced in US dollars, it creates this constant structural demand for American currency all over the world. So why does this matter to us? Well, it means international players are continuously buying American debt. And that allows the U.S. government to run massive spending deficits that would honestly instantly bankrupt almost any other nation. Case in point, 3%. In 2024, the U.S. trade deficit was about 3% of its entire GDP. For almost anyone else, importing that much more than you export is a fast track to an economic meltdown. But this vulnerability, it's completely masked by the world's reliance on the dollar. Because everyone desperately needs American cash to do business, the U.S. can pull this off without destabilizing its own system. It's a real game changer. And while that hard industrial power we talked about laid the initial groundwork, modern financial dominance has really evolved. Just look at 2025. We saw a massive milestone when the tech-heavy Nasdaq's market capitalization actually surpassed the traditional, industry-heavy New York Stock Exchange for 4 consecutive months. That's huge. It brilliantly illustrates how American economic dominance has shifted from those physical factories of the 1940s to the digital and technological behemoths of today. Which brings us to Section 3, the power of attraction, soft power, and culture. 39%. The United States currently commands an absolutely massive 39% market share of global media and entertainment. That is magnetic cultural influence in action right there. I mean, it's the movies the whole world watches, the music they stream, and the digital platforms people open up every single morning. So what does all this cultural dominance actually buy you on a global scale? Well, political scientist Joseph Nye coined it soft power. Basically, it's the ability to influence others through attraction, cultural appeal, and credible diplomacy rather than pointing a weapon at them. It's kind of the ultimate geopolitical flex, getting other nations to want exactly what you want simply because they admire your ideals. But, as academic research points out, soft power doesn't just exist in a vacuum.
It requires a really delicate balance of attraction and coercion. Throughout the Cold War and right into the modern era, pairing that cultural magnetism with sheer military and economic muscle has been the absolute high-wire act of U.S. foreign policy.
And this brings us to a really deep, ongoing debate about how to actually apply this power today. On one side, some analysts argue that the Trump administration's cuts to traditional soft power programs like USAID, combined with a shift toward transactional diplomacy, deeply eroded global trust. But on the flip side, other experts argue this was a desperately needed realignment, one that stripped away ideological engagement to prioritize tangible national interests and economic coercion in a rapidly changing world. Regardless of where you stand on it, it proves that the very definition of American power is currently up for debate. Section 4. Internal and external pressures, cracks in the foundation.
Interestingly, the most immediate threat to all this might not even be a foreign adversary. It's severe domestic political polarization. When internal political divisions run this deep, a unified U.S. foreign policy kind of falls apart. Long-term commitments become totally unreliable. It's the ultimate stress test for America's global standing when allies just aren't sure which version of the country is going to show up to the negotiating table after the next election.
And finally, Section 5, the future of global power, a multipolar world. So, if American dominance wanes, who steps into the vacuum? Academics point to a few specific heavyweights with the economic, military, and technological potential to shift us away from a unipolar system. The primary candidates on that list? China, the European Union, and India. Each of these brings a unique combination of massive industrial capacity, huge population scale, and tech advancement that could, eventually, force a truly multipolar global order. So we have to ask, what will the future world order actually look like? Will the traditional pillars of American power adapt and hold strong? Or are we witnessing the dawn of a fundamentally divided global stage? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more fact-based documentaries.